So we all going to die, right? We all going to die at one point, right? And we all have um, certain speculations of death and uh, fantasies of death or whatever you want to call it. But imagine when you die, you find yourself in a court, right? Where a trial over your life, your entire life, regardless of how many days or how long you lived, your entire life will be trialed in this court, right? And standing in as testimony is every single person that you've ever encountered. So from your family and friends to the employers or employees you had at whatever point or in point of your life, your acquaintances, your classmates, your teachers, your barber, um, everyone is in court to witness that trial. Everyone is in court to witness the life that you lived and the fate that you would deserve, the fate that will prove that you deserve in the afterlife. So on one end of the court, you've got your prosecutor. On the other end of the court, you've got your advocate, right? And so your prosecutor is there to make an argument as to why you deserve to go to hell, right? So he's not there to mince his word or sugarcoat his word. He's going to review your life, choose certain days and certain days that weren't your best days, certain choices that you made, uh, look at sins that you've committed, biblical sins that you've committed, and be like, this person did this, this, and this, and this is why he deserves to go to hell. And on the other end, as you will normally have, you are also assigned an advocate. And an advocate is to, no matter what your sins may be, no matter what life you may have lived, is to defend you, and to make an argument as to why you don't deserve to go to hell, you deserve to be in heaven, right? So this is the basic synopsis of the book, of the passage in between. Our main character is Gregor Stenfield, who lived for 37 years, dies immediately, finds himself in court with a prosecutor called Panteku, who was the devil's advocate that came straight from hell in order to oversee or never to take part in this trial, and an advocate who's a little bit more mysterious than our prosecutor, who's there to defend our main character, Gregor Stenfield, and this takes place in front of a judge, right? So within the court, there's this eye. This eye is called a Cretone. Pardon me. This eye is called Cretone, right? The eye of deeds, and the eye of deeds is where they can, pull up any day, any moment in your life, whatever it is that you were doing, whatever it is you were doing, whether it was in the streets, in your house, in the comfort of your own house, in the closets, in your room, whatever it is that you were doing at any point, at any time, they can pull it up. Either one of the two lawyers, the prosecutor or your advocate, can pull it up and say, look at what this guy was doing, what, and this is why he or she deserves to go to hell, or this is why he or she deserves to go to heaven. So now, in the book, the prosecutor mainly focuses on the 7 deadly sins, right? Because this is like biblical crimes, right? So this entire judgment based on biblical crimes, but he still has to prove as to why some crimes are necessary and should be justified as evil or bad, as for why the person was, or why our main character did it, and why he deserves to go to hell. So he mainly focuses on the 7 deadly sins and the 10 commandments, right? So he's putting up different days, different scenarios and different situations in which our main character was not on like the best side of these sins, was not his best day, but he was actually in these situations and he was succumbing to these sins and breaking these 10 commandments. And so he oversees this, and he comes at the main character from each and every single angle that he possibly can. Lust, wrath, greed, sloth, pride, gluttony, right? So whatever it is you could find from any 7 sins, right? Obviously, some sins were more predominant, in our main character's life than other sins, but whatever sins that you could find, you bring up. Then it goes into the Ten Commandments and you bring it up. And so the book switches between this trial and the life that our main character lived, right? So we get to see these arguments, but also get to relive what life this man was living. So whenever they make a case based on a certain day and certain period in someone's life, in Gregor's life, we get to see what situations are in and what he was going after. So, and our advocate he has to take a different approach because his situation is a bit more difficult, right? So not only that he has to, in some sense, justify sins, but he has to also, in another sense, prove why some sins were justifiable, and so why someone besides them, how do I put this? Besides them, balaces, what else balaces? Anyways, besides them committing the sins or breaking his commandments, hell is not a justification for what they've done, right? But it's more than that. So the book begins. Gregor wakes up in trial, blah blah blah, explains to him what's going on, he knows what's going on, and then particularly leads the attack. And so there are different arguments that they use in order to make the cases. Pantecu's arguments are far more direct and far more simple than Ansi's, the advocate's argument, because his ones are a bit more complex and take a bit more time. So he begins by proving why it is necessary to judge humans, or why God is entitled to judge humans. He says that there is a judging criteria. One, a subject of this trial must have at one point putting life, bored life. Two, the subject must have had reason, right? I stem a little bit, but yeah, subject must have bored life. The subject must have reason, and he argues for reason because he says animals bored life, but animals do not face cosmic judgment, right? They don't face cosmic judgment because the reasoning of an animal is different to that of a human. And he explains a bit more in depth than what I'm going to say, but I'm not going to put everything about the book in a a 10-minute video or however how long this is going to be. But he posts this, and he says that animals are not places of reason, despite the fact I said places again. Sorry, a bit nervous. Despite of the fact that animals did have reason, their reason is different to the reasoning of a mortal. In this case, Gregor Stenfield, right? He says there are certain things that you must expect of a human that from an animal that a human should not do, because they understand the rules of the game, right? That's basically the point of his argument. And then the third criteria for cosmic judgment is the subject must have been born in an environment of alternative choices, right? And he argues that alternative choices is what brings rise to morality, right? So alternative choices less morality, because then he says that God is just, or this court is just in judging our main character's life and the choices he made, because he had an environment with alternative choices, right? You think about it, he says that if life was linear, if life had only one way of it going, with only one resource, one cause, and one choice, right? That there is no alternative choices, so there is no room for morality. He argues that in a world where, so he makes a scenario, because Panteku, unlike the advocate, argues mostly from an analogy, reasons by analogy. So he makes the argument that, right, cannibalism, for example, is only a sin because there are alternative choices for food, right? If there was an environment in which only humans exist, no plants, no animals, no nothing else, no other food course, but their survivorship was based on eating. They cannot live without eating, and then everybody else was gonna each other. You see, argues that even the term or even the knowledge of cannibalism will not exist because it only exists because there are sense choices in the current life that we live, right? So he says that. So he says that the main character Gregor had all three. He had life, he had reason, and he had alternative choices. So if he's in a situation where he chooses a choice that is not as morally good as a different choice, it is within the court's right to prosecute him and to send him to hell for it, right? So he makes this argument. This is a pretty good argument at first, until the advocate finally gets engaged into action, you know, pushes, ends up and carves up or what does not or not, what not. So he comes at it from a different angle. He says that, right? So this judgment criteria based on morality, right? And then because they also argued about free will, so he says that on what rationality do these choices exist on? On what framework of rationality do these choices exist on? Because he says that since you uses Panteku's argument for a reason as a oh my god. Panteku's argument for reason as a basis for the argument is going to solve. So he says that if humans exist at different levels of rationality, who's to say that their framework of living is not as boxed as an animal's framework of living? Because they'll never make a choice, or they never act out of the limits of their own rationality. Which is why I say that free will is not such easily determined to exist, right? This is what he makes argument for, and then he goes back and he looks at the modifications. He looks back at the processes. Hold on a second. He looks back at the prayers, right? Because he pulls up the prayers that Gregor, since they've got evidence of everything, including the prayers. So he looks at the prayers that Gregor made, the few prayers that he made during his life, right? And he says that he begins by saying that vanity in self is a sin, right? The complexity, humans being complacent enough to think that they can achieve things without God's help, is a sin in itself. So what then is the result of a human that did turn to God and it admits his inadequacy through the form of prayer and asks for his help, for his hand in their life, right? And then if that hand was not presented to them, immediately was not presented to them in any way that would make sense to them, if that hand was not presented at all, how will then God be just? How will God be just in judging this human, right? So he pulls up this thing and these prayers and he recites them in the court as if he's saying a speech. So we see Greg is listening to himself. I was asking for help in different situations they were in, right? And we learn of the situations through, the back and forth between the trial and the main character's life, right? So we know of what situations we see the sicknesses and the troubles he had to face during that lifetime. So then it turns into a psychological evaluation too, right? So both parties are also looking at this psychologically speaking, more than just a theoretical evaluation of the scriptures of what is good and what is wrong, right? He says that so it goes about just doing repetitions. Amazing the type of words I come up with when I'm trying to explain something. Repetitions. So that's what the book is about. I cannot remember everything, right? But I cannot remember everything. I don't even kind of inform the arguments in my head as well as the arguments were written in the book. But it's this back and forth that goes on. And at one point, I almost forgot. At 1.2, Panteku brings out Cretone. So remember how there wasn't eye of deeds, right? An eye of deeds that has recording of everything. Cretone is the ear of thoughts, right? So so this is a recording of every single thought that he's had. So what Panteku did was he tried to so what Panteku did is that, remember, since family and friends are in the court with him, so he would make one of the family or friends, he put one family friend, says, it tells him to stand up, and then he plays a recording of the thoughts that Gregor used to form, right? Gregor used to form when they were around or when they're in prisons based on their lives, right? So he's trying to expose, remember the seven deadly sins, jealousy and envy, wrath or whatnot, through grudges, stuff like that. So he tries to expose these things and these underlyings through also thoughts, right? And before he even exposed that, he asks Gregor's friends or his family, is like, whether do they believe, right, upon complete actions, like, do you think that your friend or your brother or your son is worthy enough of going to heaven? And most of them say yes. But so he plays these thoughts, and he says, look at this, look at this, look at this, hear this, hear this, hear this. And he returns back at the court and he says, the fact that this man could think in these ways, right, of other people, it shows that because he was never ever content with his life, that he became he had sort of a despise of other people's growth, stuff like that, right? So these are all the imperfections that comes with being human, right? And on the other hand, again, I said his arguments are far more complex, right? Far more complex and not that straightforward as Panteku's arguments, because his situation is different. Ansi's situation is different. He has to defend. Not only is he defending, not only because in the situation that he has sort of a dilemma. He has to defend him, and also has to like question the actions of God in the cosmic court, because he begs the question: how does a creator, how does a creator go about judging his own creations when they are a manifestation of an imperfection planted in them, something that he had no control over, which why again his argument for free will was not something he will agree with, right? Because in his criteria for judgment, he mentioned free will. He said free will is an expectation from choice, because the alternative choices you would have free will, and so we are just in charging you. So the beliefs, I'm just gonna keep on saying it, but even I'm nervous. The basis is that Ansi goes back, looks at the prayers, and he says that if God is just, what justice is there in prosecuting a man for the sins of his inadequacy, which he had turned to God through prayer, right? So this is like one argument that comes up with that almost, I wouldn't say completely, it depends on which angle you get from, that brings him back into the trial, because Panteku was having a lead in the trial, so he brings back things and it levels things up. It's now they take the trial to much more than just the evaluation of Gregor's life and his psychological analysis. They basically get to the analysis of God through why he does certain things and stuff like that. And then one other argument that Panteku brought was the argument for luck. Gregor lived for 37 years, right? It is what's the term? We're informed of that almost immediately in the first chapter, when from that he lived for 7 years. So he lived for 7 years. Ansi says that if you take time, because time is linear, and you break that down into different parts, at any moment during these 37 years, at any moment during these 37 years, Gregor could have died, right? He could have died. This is an argument not just for Gregor, but it's also arguments against faith, not faith as in Faith, but faith as in Fate. The destiny, yes. Okay, arguments against destiny. So to the 7 years, you break that down into different stages of life. He says Gregor could have died at any point during his 7 years of life. Right? He could have died at 1 year of age, 2 years of age, 3 years of age, 4 years of age, 10 years of age, 11 years of age, right? So he could have died at any moment where he had less experience with life to have enough sins, right? But then he goes back all the way back to Adam and Eve, and he says that just actions of Adam and Eve, every human is born guilty before they are proven innocent. So the point of life within the perspective of or the justification for humans no longer live in the Garden of Eden because of what he did back then. He says that the purpose of life is starts then to prove your loyalty to God. That's what he says, right? He deduces this. So every human is born guilty until they prove themselves innocent. That's what he says. And then he says Gregor could have died at any moment during 7 years where could not live to the 7. In fact, he could have even lived longer than the 7 years old. But at what point, which Gregor are we judging? Yeah. Which Gregor are we judging? Are we judging the accumulation of his life? Are we judging certain aspects of his life? Because he said domino his life is like a domino effect. So one form of his was due to certain backgrounds, certain belief, certain sequences he put himself in, and certain corners in which maybe God did not put through for him and stuff like that. So he has to find a way to live and find a way to pull through for himself. So if he died at 5 years old, he argues, despite him being born guilty proven innocent, the court will not have a case, will not have a justifiable case at least. It's a justifiable case at least to send him to hell. So he says that luck is an important factor here. Unless they can prove that God has no partake in someone's death, then luck is an important factor. And if it's luck, and if all judgment is left up to luck, then there is no justifiability, there is no control in it, because in order to judge someone, their fate has to be within their hands completely. But it was not. So, how the child ends, how the child ends, what Gregor's fate is an information I'll leave up to you, just in case you're interested in going to read a book, going to see the book. And despite my presentation skills and my lack of use of linguistics or whatnot, the book is actually well written. It's very, very in-depth, far in-depth than whatever it is I said in this video, and it's a really interesting book. Yeah, I guess that's it.